Good evening. It is Thursday, September 12th, 2019, and this is the meeting of the Board for the Police Oversight Agency. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Member Joanne Fine.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wonderful. The mission statement for the Police Oversight Board, the Board for the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, is advancing constitutional policing and accountability for APD in the Albuquerque community. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay. I have a couple of changes. Under the appeals portion, that's item 10 on the agenda, and it's 10C. Appeal 065-19 and 066-19 are not intended to be appeals, and I have confirmed with the complainant twice. Those are requests to reopen the investigation, and I have asked that the complainant provide any additional evidence that has come forward to the CPOA for further investigation and consideration of reopening the case. So with that, I guess we need to vote down the approval and then a motion to approve as amended. Is that right?
Chair Galloway, I'm sorry, I was trying to find my microphone. So the question is if you need to vote to amend the agenda.
To vote to not approve the agenda as is and make a new motion to amend the agenda.
I don't believe anyone had seconded the original motion.
Valerie did.
Oh, you did. Okay. So yes, you would have to vote against approving and then have a secondary vote for the amended
That's what I
version.
thought. Okay, so motion to approve the agenda as is. All in favor? All opposed? Aye. Okay. New motion on the floor to approve the agenda as amended with the removal of cases 065-19 and 066-19.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. The agenda has been amended. We're going to open up for public comment. Thank you. Mr. Arisem, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm here to speak to the public at large. The CPOA's executive director is in violation of a federal court order, and that's the court-approved settlement agreement, paragraph 183 to be specific, and most likely the requirements of his contract. And he has done so with the full cooperation of this board. On May 2nd, 2019, the Federal Monitor reported to the court that the CPOA Administrative Office, and in turn this board, are not in operational compliance when it comes to interviewing complainants when performing investigations. The Monitor Compliance Recommendation 4.7.169A is, quote, interview all witnesses. If known witnesses are not interviewed, explain in writing why they were not interviewed, unquote. To put it simply, the executive director, with this board's approval, has not conducted investigations that are thorough and in compliance with a federal court order. On July 16, 2019, over 3 months after the Monitor's report, 5 members of this board, barely a quorum, failed in their duty to supervise the executive director and knowingly approved the executive director's unlawful actions by administratively closing at least 2 cases wherein the complainant was not interviewed. For the record here, I'm referring to CPC 06519 and 06619. On August 18, 2019, over 4 months after the Federal Monitor's report, the public learned that another case was placed on this board's consent agenda by the executive director to be administratively closed, wherein, once again, the complainant was not interviewed. However, the complainant filed public records requests and obtained significant information not reported in the investigation. She appeared at that meeting and persuaded the board to table the question and send it to the Case Review Committee for recommendation. It is my understanding that since that time, the case did not go to the Case Review Committee for open public discussion and recommendation to the full board today. Instead, the full board voted to not administratively close the case, assumedly by holding a secret rolling quorum outside of the public's view in violation of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. I suspect the full board went into damage control and decided breaking the open meetings law was preferable to further exposing their executive director's law breaking and in turn their own. For the record here, I'm referring to CPC 11419.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Your time has expired.
Excuse me?
Your time has expired.
I'm almost finished. May I? I'm the only one here.
You're not the only one here.
Well, I mean, for public comment.
You're not the only one here for public
May I
comment.
finish? I just have two more paragraphs. Today, there are 40 cases set on the consent agenda recommending the board approve an administrative closing. How many of the complainants in these cases were not interviewed? Will we see if the board cares to ask if known witnesses were interviewed, and if not, is it explained in writing why they were not interviewed? Absent that simple question, the board continues to allow their executive director's actions that prevent achievement of operational compliance with a federal court order. As a member well, I'm going to skip that paragraph. I implore the public at large to petition the Albuquerque Council to follow their own unfulfilled CPOA ordinance, section 9-4-1-11 requirement, and issue a request for proposal for an independent consultant to undertake a complete evaluation and analysis of the entire police oversight process and recommend any necessary changes or amendments that would appropriately improve the process.
Thank you. Geraldine Amato.
Your secretary has a full copy of this, and I expect it to be
Thank
put
you.
into the record verbatim.
Thank you. Ms. Amato.
Good evening. I'm glad he did that, so I should be able to ask for a few more minutes, right? A couple more seconds. If I can get the microphone down in my height here. Despite the fact that we worship the federal flag at these meetings, the Republic does not exist. It quit existing with the passage of the federal Constitution. This body would not exist if we were under the principles of the Republic, because police agents would be free agents. They would not be controlled by the Bar Association. Lawyers would be lawyers. Today, they are Bar Association-controlled operatives, as are all police agencies, including the Sheriff's Department. I was incarcerated for a month in the Lovelace Hospital. I became aware of unbelievable things, apparently that are common to all hospitals here. I encountered drug trafficking, for example. At first, I didn't realize that what I experienced and witnessed was as extensive as it was, and I tried to file a police report, but no one came to take my report. When I called 411, the person receiving my call hung up on me and would not let me call back. An attempt was made on my life with drugs for fear I'd succeed in filing a complaint. I guess those people are nervous in there, but they don't realize that drug trafficking is intense in this entire county. I survived, and an effort was then made to shuttle me to a psych ward with the help of a commando M-deity over there, Ramos. He diagnosed me off the cuff, he's not a psychiatrist, as homicidal. He said, I often say I believe we need an armed rebellion in the spirit of the American Revolution. The history of this country is, and the republic and all that, is obscured by who controls the curriculums in the colleges, universities, and the public schools. If I had more time, I'd like to tell you what I've learned about the principles of the republic. The total demise began with the Constitutional Conventions in 1785, which was 3 years after the Revolutionary War ended. The federal Constitution was set up to undermine the principles of the republic. It wasn't done immediately and suddenly where people would notice, but it was incrementally done. And if you remember the old Marshall Dillon movies, where the federal marshal was above the sheriff, the first federal Congress, under the federal Constitution, passed the first Judiciary Act, which set up essentially the British bench and bar here. So there are no free agent lawyers. Patrick Henry was a free agent lawyer. He was able to go to the Continental Congress and call for a rebellion against Great Britain. Give me liberty or give me death, he was famous for saying. That's the conclusion of his call to arms in the Continental Congress. But there's two protest speeches of his from June 1787 in the Virginia Constitutional Convention that are prophetic, if you would read them.
I'm going to pause
And I
you
would
for
like to
just-
have the time
I'm
that-
going to give you one more minute if you'll give me a second to
What
get
did
it
he
out.
get? He got
One
2
more
minutes.
minute. He didn't get 2 more minutes.
I think he got 2 minutes, let's watch him
One more
talk.
minute is what you're going to get.
I know you don't want to hear the truth. I need more time here.
One more
You
minute.
should invite me back to give you
You are
what I have
welcome.
learned after I've gotten out of school.
Every month.
Today, we are all under the control of the Bar Association. What that previous speaker relayed was something that would not exist if we had free agent police and if the people controlled the principles of the government themselves. The British Bar, BAR, British Accreditation Regency, we're essentially under the British's control still. We're actually very much like the original 13 colonies. We're business enterprises of the international financiers. And that's why more of us are becoming homeless, because we, the people, are not in charge. If we are considered irrelevant to the marketing principles of those who are using us as commercial subjects, we are cast away as unnecessary. It is a sad state of affairs that there are so many homeless people in Albuquerque and that they are getting more desperate. I was attacked on the street in broad daylight at the noon hour near Carlisle and Central, an unprovoked assault by a woman I never saw before in my life. She grabbed my cane and threw it to the ground and pushed me to the ground.
I'm gonna cut you off.
I'm filing a complaint to ask why the SOPs tell the police officers not to glean information. There's all this propaganda about behavioral health.
You
Here was
are
a woman-
welcome to file a complaint with the CPOA
Yeah, well,
office.
here's a woman that
to
behavioral
investigate
health, but nobody
SOPs.
stopped to
Ma'am?
identify her.
Your time is done. Thank you.
Yeah, your time is up. The time is
Thank
always
you.
up, but you can talk forever about nothing, around in circles. I go to these meetings.
If you do not
but
sit
when the
down, I'm
public
going to
gets
have
up
you
to say
removed
something,
from
oh,
this
forget it.
room.
I'll leave. Goodbye.
Thank you. Okay. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from last month?
Madam Chair, I had a question for the
Yes.
director on the item of public comment. Director Harness, Mr. Arison raised a point here, and I just want to ask you a couple quick follow-up questions. Is he correct in reporting that the monitor did list the agency and the board being out of compliance for the reason of not interviewing witnesses?
Chair Galloway and Member Olivas, I'm not sure where, which monitor, excuse me, I'm not sure which monitor's report that came from. It may have been referencing one particular case, but there have been numerous cases that have been reviewed by the monitor where there has not been an interview of the complainant because there's no evidentiary value that that complainant has to offer, especially when they're a third-party complainant. So his direct reference, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at all of the reports.
Okay, I may follow up on that later in the meeting. Thank you.
May I?
No.
IMR 9.
No, thank you. Mr. Arison, have a seat. All right, back to, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Okay. Make a motion that we approve the minutes from the August 8th board meeting.
I would like to note that there's an error in the minutes.
Okay.
Under, let's see, page 6, the vote, I'm listed as voting both for and against Member Olivas's motion. I voted against. So if that 4 could be removed. I'm sorry, that was for, at the top of page 6 for the first motion, CPOAB shall hereby amend its operating policies and procedures, Article 4, Part 6, as such, blah, blah, blah.
Got it.
Correct.
Any other changes that need to be made? Okay, then a motion to approve the minutes as amended,
So moved.
and I'll second. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Reports from city staff. We'll start with APD.
Good evening, Chair Galloway and members of the board. I'm Commander Mark Velarde with the Albuquerque Police Department Internal Affairs Professional Standards. During the month of August, APD responded to 43,800 calls for service, which is an increase of 143 from the month of July. During the month of August in Internal Affairs Professional Standards, we completed 40 cases. We opened 11 cases. We have 39 pending investigations. We administratively closed 13, and we had 78 EIRS alerts during that month.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
City council.
Is anybody else from it?
Oh, we do have 2 more? Okay.
Good evening. I'm Commander Rob Middleton with the Internal Affairs Force Division. This is my first appearance here, so ask me any questions you want, and we'll get this figured out. I have the Area Command force totals for the month of August. For the Foothills Area Command, we have 13 use force incidents. That's an increase from 5 from last month. The Northeast Area Command, we have 10. That's a decrease of 1 from last month. The Northwest Area Command, we had 3 use force incidents, and that's a decrease from 3 from last month. The Southeast Area Command, we had the most incidents with 27, and that's an increase from 11 from last month. And the Southwest Area Command, we had 11. That's an increase in 4. And the Valley Area Command, we had 16 use force incidents. That's a decrease of 2 from last month. And I can stand for any questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any particular reason why we more than doubled in the Southeast Area Command? Is there anything you can point to? Is there an event?
You know, there's a long story here. I'll try to keep it concise. But we are excellent at collecting data in the Albuquerque Police Department. We've always been struggling in analyzing the data. So what we did was we hired a program data analyst 2 position in our unit who is going to work with Natalie Donnelly, our program data analyst 1, to start looking at this, analyzing the data, and we'll be able to better explain this in the future about with putting layers on this, so we can explain about TAC plans, call-outs. So for instance, like this month, we'll have the state fair with additional TAC plans, which might mean more officers in the Southeast Area Command. Having said that, use of force incidents might go up. But for right now, to analyze that data for August, I don't have an answer for you. But we will get better at this in the future.
I think it's important. I'm sure you do too.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
And then the crash review board?
Good evening. I'm Lieutenant Zach Cottrell from APD Traffic. So going over this, this is going to be the second quarter of 2019. During that time, we did have 30 non-preventable crashes that were the fault of the police officer or civilian staff of the Albuquerque Police Department. That is an increase from 20 of the first quarter of the year. We did have 29 preventable crashes, which is up from 16 from quarter one. And during that time, we did have 4 officers that did have 2 preventable crashes within the last year. So they've been involved in 2 crashes that were their fault, which is up from 3 over quarter one. The payouts that risk management paid out during quarter two, there was $292,458.35 paid out in quarter two, which is actually way down from $430,000 plus in quarter one. And city damages to our own property were about $119,000, which is about flat with $131,000 from quarter one. We did continue to do the mandatory Charlie Fegan driving operating course for any officer involved in a preventable crash. We have broken that up into 4 separate groups in the second quarter that will start in August, and there are 34 officers that did have to go to that from August to September during that time period.
So on the payouts, as far as risk management goes, those track a quarter behind. So the payouts were paid out during this quarter, but they reflect incidents in the first quarter, or?
In all honesty, they could reflect claims from up to 2 years ago that are finally getting settled and paid out.
Okay.
So I didn't get a timetable for when those were paid out. So yeah, they could be 2 years old.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so
Thank you, ma'am.
much. All right, City Council.
Madam Chair, board members, at the last city council meeting, they formally received the updated CPOA policies and procedures. For the vacancy on the board, the selection committee has chosen a nominee. He is currently out of the country, but is returning next week, and so we'll be setting up a meeting with him when he returns. And assuming that goes well, then we'll send his contact information on to the outreach subcommittee so they can meet with them. And with that, I stand for any questions.
All right, thanks, Julian. Mayor's office. Okay, City Attorney's office? Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Mr. Aguilar may come back. I think he had to step out. I believe he would have been the one speaking for the mayor's office, so I will double check on that for you. For the city attorney's office, upcoming events are that in November we will have the next site visit. I don't have the week off the top of my head for you. I think it's the second or third week. At that time, we may have a public hearing. We have not requested one yet, but there has been discussion amongst the parties to consider having a public hearing during that period. The APOA has filed a motion to file a supplemental brief on their objection to SOP 257. The city and the DOJ did not oppose their request to file a supplemental motion or a supplemental brief, and the city has requested to file a response to that brief if that does happen. So from the legal end, those are the big news developments over the month. We also have, I would like to kind of open a dialogue with the members of the board regarding the policy development process and how it works best and is most helpful for us to receive input from the board and the board as a whole. As you know, the policy development process is set out in SOP 352, and SOP 352 has 2 meetings built into it, and they are OPA, the Office of Policy Analysis, and the PPRB. And OPA is technically neither meetings are open meetings. They don't fall within the Open Meetings Act definition because the entire process is an advisory process for the chief of police. So But at OPA, a policy is introduced, and we often invite stakeholders who we understand have an interest in a particular policy to come and speak to the police department at that time, based on the policies. PPRB is not an open meeting. It is where the members who are on PPRB vote on the policy. We have on occasion invited non-APD individuals who are for very specific purposes. Either they're stakeholders in the CASA or they are litigants who are suing us on a particular issue. There is a settlement agreement allowing them to have input into the policy at issue. So we do ask that we continue to follow that process. Also, it's very helpful that we have the voice of the board as a whole when we get opinions on policies. So we do ask that you all take your time to meet, however you do it, whether it's through the subcommittee and then following up through the board as a whole, and providing us your feedback. We do appreciate, we've received several letters from you recently with comments on policies, and we appreciate that. If you do need additional time, given the problems that you have based on the current timeline in our policy, please ask us. And for 99% of the policies, that should not be a problem. So we just continue to ask that we work within the policy development process as we move forward. Are there any, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to compliment you. I read the script of the transcript of the hearing, and I really thought that you did a great job being very clear about what the city's position was, and was very helpful, I thought. Just in reading it, I wasn't able to be there, and I really appreciated A, being able to read it, and then B, what your role in that. So thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask, because this has come up before, is the point you just made about board members coming to the PPRB and representing the full board. Have you had issues with individuals on the board coming and talking about their own position as opposed to the board's position? Has that been an issue recently?
No, what the most recent event that occurred was there was a request to bring an outsider to speak at PPRB, and we had indicated that's really not the purpose of this meeting.
Somebody not on the board and not part of the process.
Correct. So we just ask that we continue to keep, that is a decision that should be made by APD about whether to invite individuals to speak to the PPRB.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we understood it, because sometimes we speak in hieroglyphics and I'm not sure that I understand what the problem is. So thank you for helping me understand that.
Sure. Any other questions? Thank you.
Mr. Aguilar, were you going to represent the mayor's office? Oh, no?
Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. I actually was just coming to join you all this evening. So keep up the great work, and thank you again for the work you do with us. So, but no, I definitely don't have any comments from the mayor's office today. So thank you very much.
Thanks. CPCs.
Good evening, Chair Galloway, board members, Chris Sylvan, Community Outreach Manager, Albuquerque Police Department. I'll start out with the Southwest, CPC. I know I usually come up here and talk to you about them, but they made improvement. They have a new chair. He's young, dynamic. He moved to town to start a church, so he's really involved in the religious community. They've also added one more board member, council member. You guys are the board. So they're looking better and better. Last month they had the judges, both Metro Court judge and District Court judge, come and present. The audience was better than we expected for the Southwest CPC, so looking at improvements with that. Northeast CPC, their highlight last month was they had Secretary Brian Blaylock from CYFD present, and it was an interesting night. The show went on despite a power outage in the Northeast Heights. We just moved straight to the patio. Chair Vicki Williams did a great job of just going on with the show. Northwest had active shooter training, and I wish that would have been better attended than it was. We tried to get out the message on it, but there was still a pretty, I'd say 25 to 30 people there, but given the day and age that we live in now, active shooter training is very important. As far as outreach efforts go, we tabled at Downtown Summerfest, even though I was told that, no, that's not a good place to recruit people for boards or commissions, but we were well received. I kept a tally of how many people we brought up to the table to talk about joining CPCs, and we were up to 75. Not so good the next week or 2 weeks later when we went to Westfest, but at the same time, I was told by other people that, these Summerfests are not a great place to recruit people. I will tell you the opposite, just in case you want to do that, because we had people actually come up and they were curious about it. So that's a great place for outreach, and we're looking forward to doing it at Route 66 Westfest. I think that's what it's called. Upcoming events on October 19th, we have the third strategic planning session. We just had a planning committee meeting this afternoon for that, and looking forward to taking the pieces that we started in January and May and adding them together and actually starting to do the work. Work includes like increasing diversity, standardizing a lot of things, procedures and stuff like that. And then the final thing, and Northeast isn't here to promote it, but on October 26th, they're having a domestic violence forum, and look for that. They'll probably be here to promote that next month. With that, I stand for any questions.
Chris, I just wanted to publicly acknowledge an experience that I had. On August the 31st, I went for the Coffee with the Cop, and your office also coordinated with the New Mexico Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and it went from 9 to 12 o'clock. And I can tell you, it brought me to tears when I walked in that room at 9:15, and just the collaboration. There was about 12 officers. There was all kinds of individuals with hearing and vision impairment, and they had their translators, and they were in groups. And that was just amazing. And then also they had a panel. They had 4 police officers there. Of course, the people could ask questions. They had interpreters. They had the screen. I mean, it was just amazing, the interaction. And people didn't want to leave. And like I discussed with you earlier, I encourage you to have it again. Thank you so much. And Lieutenant Simmons, excuse me. Yeah, and Lieutenant Simmons did an amazing job.
Yeah,
also.
that was a, Chair Galloway, board member St. John, yeah, that was a amazing event. Roger Robb from the New Mexico Commission of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We had been working on that event since, oh my gosh, since this time last year, and then Lieutenant Simmons took over and put in the finishing touches, but all I've heard is positive feedback from that event, and we need to include that community in a lot of events. It would be a good problem to have if we had more of those events and we had to find interpreters.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
Okay.
On the active shooting training, is there a reason why you didn't get the number of people? Because the Northwest is pretty large, and I'm just wondering what caused it to not be attended.
Chair Galloway, board member Waits, there might have been something else going on that night. You're right, the Northwest is one of our well-attended CPC meetings, and we got the word out the best we could on social media. I don't think we did electronic billboards on that, but I'm not here to say that we didn't, but at the same time, we were shocked that there weren't more people there. But it was good training, and I would highly suggest it if you want to have that as well.
Thank you.
I just wanted to check and see, we had talked in past meetings about using our social media. Is that process working? Are we helping you with getting the word out about events?
Chair Galloway, board member Fine, I'd have to check the metrics on that, but I hope it is working because, you know, every echo chamber that we can be in is great.
Well, take this as an official invitation. Please use our social
appreciate it.
media. And I think Amanda is the person you need to talk to about that. So if you can put her on your list, we can cycle those things in there and help promote the things that you're interested in. We serve the same purpose, you know,
Right.
the same type of purpose. And the second question I wanted to ask you had to do with the CYFD visit. Can you be more specific about what it was that they came to visit with you about?
Chair Galloway, Board Member Fine. Basically, Secretary Blaylock was just, he was invited by, I want to say, Councilmember Ani Romero to discuss what CYFD does, and he explained how his department works hand in hand with the Albuquerque Police Department, and how the collaboration has been a lot better than it has in the past. From a personal standpoint, I was really excited to see that someone who had moved in out of our state, he's from San Francisco, could see the gaps and the holes in the system, and he quickly worked to fill those holes. And I think he did a really good job of looking for some commonalities between the two departments.
Thank you.
I attended that Northeast meeting. That was a really great meeting, a good speaker, and well done. I wanted to follow up with you. Last time you were here, I had asked about better coordination between the CPCs and the City Council office as far as getting some of the folks that aren't appointed to the board interested in serving on CPCs. So I guess that's a question for Mr. Moya and yourself, but can either of you comment on that? Has there any progress been made in sort of reaching out to that list or sharing that list?
Chair Galloway, Board Member Olivas, I will leave that to Julian from Council Services to talk about that.
Madam Chair, Board Member Olivas, I will be sending out that email. We had been coordinating some language for the email and just make sure it's okay. I still have the email list, and I think we're good on the language, and I'll send that out to all of our applicants that we have on our list.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody here for the APOA? Okay. Director Harness, you're up.
Good evening, Chair Galloway, Honorable Board. Just a reminder that Office of Policy Analysis and the Policy Procedures Review Board are now meeting on Wednesdays, and they're meeting every other Wednesday, so 1 week it is OPA and 1 week it is PPRB, and they're moving in that rotation for the near future. As far as my PPRB votes, the following policies were approved by me to move on in the process. 2-30, Emergency Command Post. 2-42, DWI Investigations. 3-16, Seniority. 1-16, Internal Affairs Force Division. 1-81, Proactive Response Teams. 2-15, Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems, and 2-97, Harm Reduction. The OPA policies that were discussed over the last month: 3-41, Complaints Involving Department Personnel. 3-46, Discipline System. 1-54, Honor Guard. 1-45, Family Abuse and Stalking Training Team. 1-39, DWI section, and 1-95, traffic section. I would encourage you to really take a look at 3-41, Complaints Involving Department Personnel. It directly impacts the work of the board. And 3-46, there was lengthy conversation, and the conversation will be continuing on the proposed revised discipline system. For example, the matrix, the discipline matrix, which now only goes across 3, first, second, or third offense for a level 7, the new proposal has a level 7 matrix that goes out 8 events. Instead of being rectangular, the matrix is now a triangle form. And they are proposing to roll off discipline for consideration for progressive discipline all the way up to level 1. So currently, level 4 through 1 are considered for every subsequent disciplinary act. The proposal is to even allow level 1s to be rolled off after, I believe, 6 or 8 years of the officer's career. So there's lots of changes. And the other large issue is the concept of considering similar events for progressive discipline. I have always maintained that if you have a level 7 and you have another level 7 within 1 year, that means it's a second offense. The department interprets that it has to be a similar event. So it would need to be 2 events of rudeness. So you couldn't have a preventable accident and a rudeness and have them be considered a second offense within 1 year. And I expressed my concerns yesterday in the Office of Policy Analysis that this new rewrite of 3-46 still does not adequately address similar in nature, which is in the definition. Similar in nature is not defined. Those are large issues moving forward with 3-46. The use of force training level 2 has been approved by the Department of Justice. The Academy is now awaiting the comments of the monitor. Simply for informational purposes, I will be uploading the FRB tactical activation findings from the Force Review Board. I will be putting those up in SharePoint. I met with the parliamentarian yesterday, and so after NACOL, we will be arranging a training session on Robert's Rules of Order. Those that are attending should have their information on their travel for NACOL. Member Fine has already referenced the fact that you've received the transcript of the objection hearing for the APOA's objection to 2-57. The transcript for the August 20 status conference is not yet available. Dr. Cass and I conducted the interviews of 3 data analyst candidates of the 5 that we identified as qualified. I hope to finish the reference checks tomorrow and then come to a conclusion on who to hire. City HR has forwarded 16 qualified applicants for the investigator position, and I'll begin that review of those applicants next week. The board admin position application period closed on the 4th of September. I have not received the applications of those that were deemed qualified yet. And to supplement Attorney Van Meter's report, the site visit in November is November 18th through the 22nd. Other than that, I stand for questions.
I'd like to go back to 3-41. Tell me again what you called that. Was that complaints?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, 3-41 is complaints involving department personnel.
Okay, so could you better define that? Because it would seem to me that complaints that involve APD personnel is all about what we're doing. So is there a distinction? Is it different from what we normally do? How does this affect us?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, it is a policy that directs administrative investigations for both the Civilian Police Oversight Agency and Internal Affairs Professional Standards.
So it's a combination of, some of them would come to us and some would go to them?
That's correct.
It's their handling of civilian complaints or complaints about APD personnel?
Correct, and their directives on how to handle complaints that come from civilians and their requirements that they turn them over to us in a timely manner within all of their requirements for their handling of a civilian complaint.
Okay, can you send us a link to 341 and 346?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, I can send you the drafts.
Okay, would you do that?
Yes, because I have them downloaded, so I can send you the drafts
That would be
that were
helpful.
proposed.
Okay, and do you want to just have that on the agenda for next time? Do you want us, you said you wanted to bring it up, to talk about it. Do you want to go through policy and then bring it to us, or how do you want to handle this?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, it's at OPA, so right now, I believe it's probably being sent for comment for department personnel, and I'm not sure how long it'll be before it comes to PPRB. I think that it's going to be, at least for 346, the discipline system, I think there's going to be many discussions before it gets to that point.
So we should just be aware at this point?
It's more of an awareness at this point.
All right. Thank you.
I'm wondering where the mediation thing stands. Remember, we were going to make some sort of a request to the court to, what, can you update us on that, please?
Chair Galloway, Member Vandeventer, I haven't taken any action on that.
Okay, when can we anticipate action being taken on that?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Vandeventer, I will have something by the next board meeting.
Okay, that would be good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Moving on to reports from subcommittees. We'll start with community outreach. Vice Chair Fine.
I need the right glasses, excuse me. Our last meeting was, I'm so sorry. Our last meeting was September 3rd, and our next meeting is October 22nd. We are coming up with a way of collecting people we will outreach to, organizations, issues, groups related to issues that we will outreach to. We are putting together a list of those, and they include the African American community, the mental health community, the homeless community. We talked about high school kids, deaf and hard of hearing, and transgender was also the groups we were talking about. And we are now collecting information to be able to talk to organizations that deal with those populations and get their feedback about what kinds of events and who within their community we should be talking to and when that could be, so we could set up a schedule and do our outreach throughout the year. So at our next meeting, we should be able to prioritize, have those lists and prioritize them, and then start the work of doing it. Like I said, the next meeting is October 22nd.
Okay. Policy and procedure, Member Vandeventer.
Okay, so we met last Thursday, which was September 5th. We briefly discussed whether there were any OPA policies to really dig into. There weren't at the time. We discussed SOPs that we have received from PPRB since the last round. And so those are 230, 297, and 316. In your packet, you have a letter addressing those three policies. This letter is really a comment of no comment, but this is the practice I've been trying to bring us into. That way we're assuring that we communicate back to APD that we've seen the work and we just don't have anything to say about it. So I will ask the board to approve that letter. That's what came out of PPRB. We've been having an ongoing discussion about 2-8, which is the OBRD, on-body recording devices policy. That policy is currently being reworked, but I had wanted to formalize a recommendation that we made in an informal way the last round, but we never made it in a formal way, so we didn't put it into writing. And that recommendation was that we ask APD to consider changing the retention timeframe for non-evidentiary videos from 120 days to 1 year. And so I put that into writing. You have another letter in your packet that I put together, and the content of that letter is just as I stated. It asks them to consider making the retention timeframe for non-evidentiary videos, and I say at least 1 year is how I write it in there. At the bottom, I note that we've been having a discussion about the muting capabilities of the OBRD, and that we may make comment on that at a later date, but we really couldn't settle on exactly what we thought because we realized we were speculating a lot about how muting was going to work in 2.8. So we decided to wait to comment until we had a policy in hand. So I'll ask the board to also approve the letter that we've put together on 2.8. Let's see, I, just like Director Harness, voted to approve the same policies that he has named. To save time, I won't repeat all of those. The policies that he's brought to our attention, 341 and 346 namely, those were just brought to OPA yesterday. And so those are going to be, I'll be placing those on the subcommittee's agenda for our next meeting so that we can begin our conversations about those policies at the next meeting. That way we can, work it up and just get started on it, basically. And so there's plenty of time for that. Let's see. Oh, and we had a presentation from a man named Chris Michels, and he has been communicating a lot with us. Well, like unilaterally, he's been sending us a lot of communications. And so he's concerned about licensing issues that are happening at the Law Enforcement Academy. And so I've communicated with him previously and, sort of explained that I really don't see that as within our purview because we just don't have any jurisdiction over the Law Enforcement Academy, but that, we could invite him to present his concerns and we could discuss it and see if there were any paths forward on any of it. So that's what we did. We didn't take any action on anything he presented. He did give us he specifically, ultimately, towards the end of the meeting, requested that there were a couple of trainings that we attend, as well, trainings that happen at the APD Academy, as well as he asked us to look at I think it's called the post, what is that? Can you help me out here, Dr. Cass? He's talking about the fitness tests and saying that they have been changed in the academy in a way that sort of it has a discriminatory effect towards people over the age of 35 and women. And he asked us to take a look at that. And so we haven't done anything, but we're going to further our discussion about those things at our next meeting. And that would be everything that we did. And our next meeting is scheduled October 3rd, 2019, and it occurs at 12:30 in the basement of the Plaza del Sol meeting.
I'd like to add.
Sure.
I'd like to add something to this report. I met with Commander Byrd, and it is pertinent, relevant to both the issues that Chris Michels raised at our board meeting, or at our committee meeting, and the opportunity to get someone to give us more information about the status of the use of force training at APD, as well as some insight into the training academy. So This was on August 16th, so it was shortly after our last POB meeting. And Commander Byrd indicated that she would be willing to come and talk to us about the status of the training academy, use of force training, as well as other questions. So what I would suggest that we do is that we invite her to an upcoming meeting, probably no earlier than November, with some information that we provide her as to what our interests are, what kind of questions we have. But I think there's already several items on that agenda, so especially use of force training and the kind of issues that that Chris Michelle's raised at our policy meeting. So that's so that's one addition. The other issue that I'd like to bring up that is associated with personnel is with policy committee is the one that the city raised relative to us attending or what the attendance was at the PPRB. And as I understand it, a person was brought to the PPRB meeting as advertised as an expert witness to give some information regarding the drone policy, whatever that number is, but that was one of the issues that was presented. This person was never presented to the policy committee. We had no knowledge that there was someone who was being sent to the PPRB in a sense representing the views of the board. I think this is a violation of what we're supposed of the way. It's a violation of the trust that we have in the representative of the POB at the PPRB. There's a misrepresentation, I believe, that whoever was brought to this meeting was an expert. There was no credentials cited, as near as I can tell, and they were certainly never presented in advance to the Policy and Procedures Board. So I think the city has a view, and I think they have a position associated with this, and it's their committee. But I think, and they can, and I think as Ms. Van Meter expressed, this, they're trying to take a positive approach as to how information is provided and when is information provided to the policy process. I think we also have a position to take here, and I think the board should be represented in their view should be representative and created before someone is sent to the PPRB on our behalf. So I object to that event occurring, and I believe that we need to look into how this is going to be dealt with in the future.
So I probably should just respond to that because I know what you're talking. No one, literally no one has mentioned that this was a problem, so I had no idea, zero clue whatsoever that anyone had an issue with this. But this is what I did. The drone policy was coming before PPRB, and I know an attorney who's like, I mean, among other things, he's a technology wizard, but he's also a pilot. And so he's really familiar with all of the regulations, et cetera. And I knew when I was reviewing the policies that I personally was like, it was just over my head. It was a different pay grade. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be useful to reach out to Tom to see if he had anything helpful to discuss with this policy? And so he looked at the policy and he said, yeah, I have a few ideas about where the policy could be improved. And so I called Amir Chappell, who is the APD policy development person. I took this directly to APD and I said, I know a person who has a lot of subject matter expertise in this area. He has some ideas. He has relayed them to me. I think he would do a better job, however, of presenting these different ideas than I could because they're too technical for me, basically. And I view the PPRB policy development process as really like it's workshopping in there. It's not like, oh, the board is making this recommendation. We do that. That's what I'm putting together in writing. These are the board recommendations. In those meetings, we're just having a workshop. And so I just thought that that would be a useful way to go about contributing something to the meeting and the policy. I thought it was very innocent. I didn't think anyone would have a problem with it. But since we do need to address how we do it going forward, I just won't do that again. It's not a big deal. I wasn't trying to get around anyone. I was just trying to be helpful. So I don't have to do that sort of thing anymore to work on policy. I just knew that I couldn't help with the policy, but I thought I knew someone who could. And so I was trying to facilitate that, and that's it.
Did Amir give you the okay to bring this person?
Yeah, Amir, so he said, at first he said, well, the PPRB meetings aren't open to the public, and I said, yeah, it's up to you. I just said, like, I've seen special invitees before. This could be a useful time for one of those, but it's completely up to you. And then he sent me an email saying, I've talked to Mr. Blog, and I think it would be okay for him to come. So I thought it was okay by APD. I didn't realize that it was any sort of issue at all. So I won't do it again. I think that solves the problem.
Chair Galloway?
Yes.
It seems to me like it's a non-issue if there's an approval from Mr. Chappell. That doesn't seem like there's anything more to talk about. I guess we have the opinion of the city now that they don't approve of that, but it seems like we're sort of beating a dead horse here.
Vice Chair Fine?
It seems to me that whatever your intentions were, there is an objection. And you've
That's
said you
fine.
won't do it. I think that the city's made clear what their position is. I think your own committee one of your members has made that clear as well. So I think we just move on.
Yeah, it's all fine with me. I have literally no problem.
Okay.
Can we get to your policies and the rest of your stuff?
Oh, sure. I would like to make a motion that the board approve the letter that has been drafted by myself on SOP 2-8 to send forward to Chief Geyer and APD.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then I would also like to make a motion that the board approve the letter regarding 2-30, 2-97, and 316, and send that off to, oh, look, I need to make a correction here. Send that off to Chief Geyer and APD.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed on either of those? I didn't ask, but, okay. All right. Yes, sir?
I just wanted to commend Member Van de Vendor for both of these letters. I think that they're very professional, and last time we kind of had a discussion about how trying to come to the full board with work product, and I think these are the exemplary example of that, and I commend you for your hard work on those.
Oh, thank you.
Next meeting scheduled October 3rd?
Yes.
Okay. Case Review Subcommittee, Member St. John.
Yes, good evening. We had our meeting on September the 3rd, 2019, and all the cases that we've reviewed and voted on are on this evening's agenda. And our next meeting is currently scheduled for September the 24th, 2019. That will be 2 meetings in 1 month. I'm going to talk to the people on the committee and Director Harness to see if we need 2 meetings to catch up and find out exactly where we're at. Thank you.
Okay.
I have something
Yes, ma'am.
related to that. I ask this question every month, but I'd like an update from Director Harness about serious use of force cases and officer-involved shooting cases. Can you give us an update on when and how many we're going to get? Are we about to get hit with a tidal wave? What's going on?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, I do not know when they are going to commence the Force Review Board's review of serious use of force cases at this point. There's no date certain.
How long has it been since we've reviewed serious use of force or officer-involved shooting cases? It feels like it's more than a
Chair
year.
Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, I believe since November of the last Force Review Board that reviewed a serious use of force case was November of 2017.
That's a very long time. Who should we ask at APD about that? Should we ask somebody? What should we do about this? Because I'm not okay with waiting.
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, the head of the Force Review Board is Chief of Staff Ross.
If the board doesn't object, I would ask the chair to consider or make a motion to this board to consider contacting APD. That is well over a year, almost 2, and that is a serious part of what we're here to do, and through no fault of ours, it's been waylaid. I have real concerns about that. Not only about the cases untouched by this body, but also the things that we're not learning about this. And like I said, I've been bringing it up each month for a while.
Tina, can we take action on that?
I just want
It's
to
not
ask
a-
them what's up.
I think you asked for a motion to
Yeah,
do so,
to-
right?
right.
Can we do that?
There's not, I'm sorry, Chair Galloway and Vice Chair Fine, there's not a specific agenda item that notices that you want to take action, but to make an inquiry or to vote, to ask someone at APD about a status of a process isn't necessarily an action item. So if the board would like to vocalize support for the inquiry or direct someone on the board or Director Harness to make that inquiry, that doesn't constitute an action. It's simply getting information for the board for its next meeting.
Yes, Lindsay, do you have something to add?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Member Fine. To be sure, I'm sorry, I stepped out of the room. Are you wondering when the Force Review Board will begin reviewing serious uses of force?
It's almost 2 years since we have seen a case on serious use of force or an officer-involved shooting. Clearly, there are cases to be reviewed by this board. 2 years is a long time. So I'm asking, whatever it takes to get that to us, I want to know what that process is and what the timeline is.
I can provide you with an update of the status of that. Member Fine and Madam Galloway. The City of Albuquerque has been working on the Force Review Board policy for some period of time. We submitted it to the internal monitor, the independent monitor and the DOJ before July 31st. Based on the training that was delivered to APD on the Force Review Board, APD determined, and it was actually approved, by the DOJ and the monitor at that time. However, based on the training that was delivered, it was decided that there were corrections that should be made to the policy, so we requested to make a few changes to it. We've made those changes, and last week we submitted that proposed policy again to the Department of Justice and the monitor. So they have 15 business days to let us know their opinion. It doesn't always work out so cleanly like that. If they would like changes based on what we've done, it can take a little bit longer. But given that it was already approved once, I'm hopeful that it won't take much longer to get that policy adopted. Once that policy is adopted, we could move forward with reviewing serious uses of force and the supervisory sample.
So is it the city's position that you are not reviewing them because you don't know yet what to review them against?
No, the Force Review Board was dismantled. The only reason that the department is reviewing tactical activations at this point is because the the department adopted a special order which governed the process, which allowed us to do that. So it was recommended and agreed upon by the DOJ and the monitoring team to do it in this particular fashion to get our feet wet, so to speak, on tactical activations, make sure that that was running smoothly, and then once we have the policy adopted, to move forward with doing it on serious uses of force and the other use of force cases that the FRB must review.
I appreciate what you're saying. I think 2 years is crazy, and it sidesteps the process that was put in place by DOJ to have civilian review. There's no excuse for 2 years. I don't care what you're trying to say or what the issues are. For 2 years, we have seen no cases. That's not okay. When they come, they will come in a flood, and then we'll be held accountable for not getting it done quick enough. I'm just saying, I'm on record saying I'm not happy about this, and I want to see some action taken. Hopefully by the next board meeting, we will have cases in front of us. But if we don't, I'd like to know why.
Ms. Van Meter, what happens to the cases? I mean, just because a policy is stalled, use of force events don't stop occurring. What happens?
There is a backlog right now. There is going to be, there's been discussion between the monitoring team, the department, and the Department of Justice about which of those cases, if any, all need to be reviewed by the Force Review Board in the backlog, or whether it makes more sense for the department to move forward with a forward-facing goal of looking at these cases from now going forward. So there is a possibility that not all of the cases within that backlog will be reviewed by the Force Review Board. Part of the reason, if we don't know if it'll be all, if it'll be a sample, at this point in time, there's no agreement on that. Part of the reason that the city believes it's appropriate to not move forward with reviewing every single one of those cases by the Force Review Board is because of the serious look at those cases that has been done by the Force Investigative Section or Commander Middleton's team on the backlog. So those cases have been thoroughly reviewed by several steps along the way, and then they've of course gone to the monitoring team to be reviewed as well. So there's not a decision on that right now, but that's a possibility.
From a historical perspective, when we inherited a backlog of cases, we made a commitment to review every single one. I would, for myself, I'll just speak for myself, I would really object to drawing a line in the sand, the city drawing a line in the sand and saying, we'll go from this point forward. Many of the cases that are in the CASA are cases we haven't seen. That's not okay. We at least have to learn as a community. You can't cut a big hole in this and say, well, these are gone, they're history, after you delayed it 2 years. That's not okay. At least it's not okay with me. So, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Member Waits.
Are you saying that the city makes that decision?
No, it has to be approved by the Department of Justice and the monitoring team.
And they're the ones that draw the line in the sand?
Ultimately, they will be the ones that decide which cases need to be reviewed and which do not, if any.
Without civilian input? Without this body having input?
You are always able to give input by having your meetings and by communicating with the Department of Justice.
We can't give input on something we
monitor.
haven't seen.
So, and there isn't a plan yet. There is not a plan yet.
That's terrible.
So.
That's just terrible.
Okay,
Any further questions?
thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
So my question remains, are we contacting somebody?
Board member
Whether
Fine.
it's an action
Well,
or not?
can I
Yes.
offer a suggestion? Maybe one thing we could do is we could address this with the court in our next opportunity to appear at a hearing, sort of like the last letter we put together, raising our primary concerns of the moment.
I would hate to wait for the court to weigh in. I think we have relationships with the APD.
Well, I'm not
and
saying
with
that's the
DOJ.
only thing we have to do, but I just wonder if that might be a good venue also to raise the issue.
I don't know that we have an issue yet to raise. until we find out what their plan is, we don't, I mean, we're.
The option for cutting
battling
cases
windmills.
out of the review process by civilian oversight, if they come around us in that way, without us being part of that decision, that is not okay. That is counter to everything we're here for.
I don't disagree, I just don't think that we're there tonight. I don't think we're at that point tonight. But making the inquiry to see where things are in the process, I think that's a separate issue.
Well, we have new information. We have new information that says we may be cut out of that process. I think we can ask about that. Where is that? We object to that. Or we don't. I do.
Member Olivas?
I think I'm inclined to support Member Fine on this, that 2 years is way too long to wait to see any of these cases, and then the option then being that we see none of them, or only those going forward. If the point of this whole process, as Director Harness let us know in his update about the status hearing, the judge seems very interested in the fact that this body, or what it was before the CASA, had it been functioning properly, could have prevented this had it functioned the way it needed to function. And I don't see how we can do that if we just cut out this huge block of cases. So I agree with Member Fine and Member Van de Vendor that going forward, probably pursue both routes, both the indirect, what's happening, and then address it with the court to get ahead of it, in my mind.
I don't disagree, I just don't think that we're there yet. I think that if they come back to us and say, we're gonna cut these, we're gonna draw the line in the sand, and these cases aren't going to be reviewed, then we have something to talk about. But right now, it's just a possibility that might be, they may decide that's not going to be the way it is, and then we're raising a fuss over nothing. And that doesn't do very much for our credibility, I think.
Okay. So why can't we inquire where we're at? So I think that's the process that we should take right now. Okay.
Is everybody okay with that? Just making
And
an
it doesn't
inquiry as to
require
where
a
we
vote.
are?
Yeah, maybe we put it on the next agenda as a report back type of thing.
We can do that. Do you all want Director Harness to make that inquiry, or do you want me to do that? Or do you want Valerie to do that as chair of case review?
I'm fine with Director Harness doing it. I think it's important that we not wait and be in a reactive position. That if there are people on here that believe, take a vote now. Do you believe that it's okay for the civilian process to be circumvented by a decision made outside of us? Is that okay with you? If it isn't, let's get on it now before they make a decision. Why wait and be in a reactive pose? Why not say, we don't want to see that happen? We want to review all the cases and find out what's holding it up and put our voice together for, let's review the cases.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was Board Member Fine that we have Director Harness look into it for us and give us a report next month.
All right, Director Harness. If you'll make a call.
Should we
Thank you,
make a
sir.
motion?
No, we're not making motions because it's not a noticed item on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
All right, anything else about case review?
I have one more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the cases that came up, that has been part of our discussions over the last few months, has to do with trying to understand CYFD and the policies that they are grappling with when it comes to child abuse in particular. And so we'll deal with the case that is related to that in a little while. But I think that there is an argument to be made that we should invite CYFD here to help us understand the barriers that they face. We've had several cases that we've reviewed, and we are left not understanding what those barriers are. It's very easy to walk away from the case that we'll talk about later this evening and say to yourself, well, a 7-year-old said there was no problem, so therefore there's no problem, there's no investigation. That is a very simple answer and an incomplete answer.
And so I think it's important that we, because we're going to see more cases like this, they will come before us. I think that it's important that we learn from CYFD, ask them to come here. I inquired today to find out if they were willing to do that, and to come and talk to us, not about any particular case, because they couldn't do that, but to talk about what are the barriers that they face in dealing with child abuse cases. Because I think not only the community, but we ourselves would benefit from understanding that. And we can argue with each other and argue with the community about who did what to when and who and all this stuff in the cases, but if we don't have the basic foundation of understanding what's going on in terms of the law and what they're faced with, and the realities of dealing with this particular kind of victim, I think that we will always spin our wheels on these things. It's very emotional, and we all get upset about it, and people feel righteous and like they know everything, or that they think others should know what they know or understand what they know. I don't think that that's logical, and I don't think it's helpful. And since we will deal with more cases like this, I did make a call to CYFD. I had several conversations with them, asking them if they would be willing to come to our next meeting, if that was approved by the board, to talk about that, to educate us about the issue of child abuse and how investigations can be initiated or can be stopped based on the facts of the case, without discussing a particular case. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know if anybody objects to them coming, but I just want to let you know that they're willing to come next month.
No objection in the least.
Well, not necessarily an objection, but didn't we just do that? That guy, you kind of raised the same thing previously the last time we talked about this case up here, and suggested we have CYFD come, and then they did come, and then he gave us a presentation, and then I saw him on the news last night, and I was thinking, oh, that was the guy Joanne had come from CYFD to talk to us about the obstacles.
CYFD. He was from CACU, the Crimes Against Children Unit. He was from APD. So this is somebody from CYFD. This is a two-part problem, and I think we need to hear from both of them. So that's why I'm suggesting it.
Oh, I see. My apologies.
I don't have an explicit objection to it, but I would just raise the point that our purview ends with the police department with the city of Albuquerque. Now, there's a lot of interface there, and it's important to understand sort of where those lines stop, but as far as sort of what action we can take or what involvement we have in that, really, I don't think we have any grounds there. But I think I don't object to it. I just wanted to point that out.
To me, this is a learning experience. This is for us to learn from CYFD so that when we get cases, we'll have more information from which to understand them.
And it may reveal holes or gaps in policies that exist that allow for things to fall through the cracks. That might be an outcome that would be part of our purview.
I think the education would be helpful not only for us, but for the general public. At some point, we have to move beyond Child Abuse 101 and get to Child Abuse 202, and we're not going to get there without some education. And that's what I'm proposing.
You're good? Okay. All right. I'm good with that. I'm not hearing any strong objections to having CYFD come in, so if we can make that invitation to them for next month's meeting, I think that would be lovely. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, to speak, Joanne, are you going to contact them since you?
I already did, so
okay.
yeah, I will.
Okay.
I will make sure that that I work with Katrina and Mr. Harness on where it should go in the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question for the case review committee item. Is that okay?
Yes.
I understood, I wasn't able to attend the last case review committee, but I understood that the appeal, the one remaining appeal 132-18, which is the case we're discussing, was to be placed on a non-consent agenda, and I don't see it. It's just there's item 10, which is cases, and they're all lumped together.
We did talk about that, but it was an appeal.
It's an appeal, not a, so it's under appeal.
Right, but the intent of the case review committee was to have it
the board discuss
sectioned out as a non-consent. whereas all of the other cases were consent so that we can move them through all at once. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, but I don't see that as being listed as part of the consent agenda.
Oh. That's what I'm saying.
I understand you don't have a consent versus non-consent agenda. I understand.
I think it was just listed incorrectly. Or there's a way you can argue that it was an appeal? Because we did vote on this already.
Well, it
right?
is an appeal, but the case review committee didn't agree necessarily on what recommendation to make, correct? So
But
then,
we decided that we would bring it to the full board for discussion by the full board.
okay, so can I make a motion to, what I'm trying to do here is make it so that we can still move all the other cases through in one fell swoop and then separate this one out. I guess we can do that by just moving items A and then items B, and then when we get to item C. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yep.
I think that's fine.
Okay. I'm done,
Good
thank you.
catch, though, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure
didn't
that it's
catch it.
incorrect. I'm
Well,
not
just the
positive.
consent versus non-consent, it's not listed either way. And typically it is. Okay, Personnel Subcommittee, we met August 23rd. We are still discussing the idea of having a facilitated kind of gathering between the board and the agency. And Dr. Cass has been doing some work and has some recommendations to present to the committee next, when next we meet. And then we should have recommendations for the board, if all goes well, in October. We also met with Devin, what is Devin's last name, Ms. Kuntz, sorry.
Chairmember Galloway, Devin's last name is Moody.
Devin Moody, to discuss the findings of the investigation that will be discussed during our closed session. And our next meeting is scheduled for September 27th.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
If I can add, I did make some recommendations that I sent to the personnel subcommittee members, and I can tell the board about these now, and then when we get to it
I
next.
think it's appropriate to go through the committee and then up to the board.
I sent these out to the committee.
I know, but we haven't discussed it as a committee yet.
Could I continue?
Sure.
So the process that I came up with is, it turns out Chair Galloway had found a couple of possibilities for a facilitator, but I contacted the city, and they have a program in place already which would allow what we want to do to be done at no cost to us. And so the process is to designate we contact the department in the city that deals with this, that's Tyson Hummel, and he finds a facilitator. The facilitator would do some groundwork, read the documents that are relevant here, interview the board members privately, so that when we came to a facilitated meeting, he would have some background as to what the issues were between the board and the agency. So that's the proposal that's on the table, and as Chair Galloway mentioned, we can talk about this at the next personnel meeting, but I didn't want to keep it a secret, given that it was, it's out there now. So that's all I had.
Okay. I would like to, since I failed to do this at the beginning of the meeting, I would like to ask that we amend the agenda one more time and move our closed discussion up to this break, so that we're not wasting time for anybody else that may be participating.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, then I'm going to move us into a closed session. We'll do that with a roll call vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We are now in closed session. So I hear.
Don't eat all.
All I had today was a scone. One scone.
Ooh. Bam, I don't get to eat my hummus and olives. Have them for breakfast. I'm getting so I can't wear anything else.
I've been trying to use Monterey Jack.
Tina, quickly, in front of everybody, I just have a question. Why is it appropriate for you to come into this meeting with a conflict of interest because you represent the board, but you also represent the CPOA?
So,
I've been asked that question.
the way that it works is I represent the board and the agency, and if there is an issue,
Okay, because they were wondering why you were in here because I.
the agency would then get their own review to see in the event there was an action.
Okay.
But
Oh, I know when we're talking about ours, we're gonna talk about the case with Ed? Oh, okay, because you also represented Ed, so, and you represent the board, so wouldn't it be a conflict of interest?
no, because I don't have a vote and I'm not
Okay.
providing you guys legal advice. I have no say.
No, somebody asked me that,
Yeah,
okay,
no.
that's all, I didn't wanna make a big deal, maybe.